All right. So, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Antoinette Vixen. My co-chair is Dr. Elizabeth Cruson, and we are both full-time faculty here at the Department of Behavioral Sciences with UAGC. And we would like to welcome you all to Balancing Flexibility and Limitations Lessons Learned from Fostering a Culture of Care in Practice. Our presenters today will be Dr. Joan Burkhart, Dr. Denise Maxwell, and Dr. James Moore. We hope you enjoyed the session.
Thanks for kicking us off, and thank you for being here. As you hear on Southwest all the time, I know you have lots of options for your flight, so we appreciate you taking this flight with us. Each of the presenters will present themselves or share a little bit about themselves as they get into their portion of the presentation. I'm Denise Maxwell, and I have the opportunity to serve as one of the assistant deans in the College of Science and Liberal Arts, and I supervise the Department of Education and Liberal Arts. So to just kick the presentation off a little bit before we do a little bit of interactive with you and get you to share some of your thoughts, as we were putting this together, we thought, well, it'd probably be helpful to give some background as to why we are serving as representatives of the UAGC Faculty Culture of Care Committee. Our committee has been operating for a little over a year and a half. We represent 2 representatives from each department across the university. And the rationale for coming together was so that we could share how and what we're implementing around the culture of care. We could share resources with each other, get to that nucleus of reaching out to our associate faculty, and to start to talk about some of the challenges that instructors are facing as they are defining and implementing the culture of care. What we came to find through our conversations is that we needed to define the culture of care. And at that time, the institution had not started to work on that as a council. So it was important for faculty to be able to dialogue and discuss with each other. And we found that we have unique perspectives and we have different experiences and different needs, and we have insight that was beneficial to share with each other. So what we decided to do in this session is really share what our lessons have been that we have learned, and the need for realistic boundaries within our classroom and in our instruction, the need for flexibility, but also so important, we determined, was the individual ownership that we have over how we bring our own personal touch to the implementation of the culture of care within our classrooms. So part of the presentation proposal from the summit was that each presenter present what their description or belief was around the culture of care. And so I'm sharing this with you because I'm about ready to engage you and ask you to do some sharing. So each of the presenters today have put together, as briefly as we can, what our meaning is that we attach to culture of care in our instructional practice and our outreach to students. So as I said, I'm priming you to get ready to do some of your sharing. So we're going to do an interactive. You're going to use the chat. Some of you may be familiar with the waterfall activity. And what I'm asking you to do is in the chat, if you would type something briefly, succinctly, as how do you apply culture of care in your role? But don't hit enter yet. We kind of want to all do it together so we can spend time looking at what each of you have presented. So if you would open up the chat feature, and in there, if you would go ahead and type in how you apply your approach to culture of care in your role. And then I'll give you a minute to do that, and then we'll push enter and see what everybody has to say. Okay, go ahead and press enter and let's see what populates. You follow directions very well, thanks. Resources, understanding what they are. Engaging other faculty. The golden rule, absolutely. acknowledging others and their accomplishments, authentic caring. What an important word, Tamika. All right, I'm going to take you into another interactive, and then I promise we'll get into the storytelling at that point. So, educators, you may be familiar with this, the KWL. You already know a certain amount. So what I'm curious about is, what do you want to know and what are you hoping to learn? So we're going to do the waterfall feature again, holding your idea in the chat. And this is an opportunity for you to go ahead and present maybe a question or something that you're hoping gets answered in this presentation. We'll monitor the chat, and then at the end, we'll come back and look at it and see if there are some things we haven't touched on that we could talk about. But this is your opportunity to kind of say, what are you curious about right now? What are you hoping that you hear in this discussion? So take another minute to use the chat, but don't push enter. All right, go ahead and push enter, and let's see what some of the thoughts are that are out there. We're going to spend time looking at some of this while others start to present. So I'm going to turn it over to James.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And hopefully we reach out and touch some of the points that we're wanting to share, as well as those that are on your mind. And I noticed that one of the responses was accountability. On my second slide, I have something I think that may appeal to folks regarding responsibility and accountability. So, but let me get into it. Some of the challenges that we ran into when this was presented to us for the first time. And I remember listening to Dr. Beagle, and let me give you my caveat. I love stories. I love telling stories, as Dr. Maxwell and Dr. Burkhart will probably tell you. But she shared with us the story of how an instructor reached out to her when she was struggling and going through some things. And I'm bringing that up because currently I'm teaching a course about leadership and teamwork. And one of the things that we talk about is sometimes a leader has to have those hard conversations. And one of those challenges or hard conversations is when we roll this out to the students or to the professors regarding the students, some of them probably took things out of context. And I think, we talk about names and what we call something, and I'll get into this more later, but we called it Power of One when we started. And I think the interpretation for a lot of folks was it's not just the power of one instructor, but maybe it's the power to help one student. And I think because of the context, it was interpreted incorrectly or differently. I won't say incorrectly, differently by different folks. So that was one of the things that we had to address when we first started, because the perspective was that we help perhaps one student, or maybe we're only going to help the students that are struggling. What about the other students? We have a lot of students. How are we going to handle that? And that was what we had to look at. And it's not just the students that were struggling that are affected by our culture of care or by what was originally the Power of One. So I wanted to kind of touch on that and open that up because it's going to be about perspectives. And I'm going to turn it over to Joan in just a moment, but I want to get that kind of in your ear a little bit, because we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about, when I come back, I'll talk a little bit about the stresses and tie into those perspectives a little bit more and how we're actually doing those things, but under another name. Dr. Burkhart?
Thank you so much, James. So I teach the second course that students typically take in their program, Digital Fluency. So these are newbies. And as you know, we work with very diverse students, and culture of care demands a one-on-one approach. There is no one-stop shop template we can use for our responses. Our students consist of first-generation students, first-generation high school grads. Some of them, this is their first person in their family to graduate from high school. Active duty military, veterans, their families. They're overcoming obstacles like addiction, poverty, incarceration, all sorts of trauma, diverse socioeconomic status, diverse professions, schedules, skill levels, hidden cultural attributes. And importantly, one thing I see a lot is varying confidence levels. And that's kind of what I'm going to speak to, all of those things today, but really I see a lot with confidence. It is up to me, it is up to us as faculty to really engender this sense of belonging and not necessarily be the loudest voice, but to be the consistent voice in their ear that says to them, we are your people and you are ours. And that is my culture of care mission. So in all student messages, which again, as you all likely know, are typically long, and often I find that students will say everything but the heart of the challenge, whether that's purposefully or not. And it often takes us looking for clues, what I call Easter eggs, and that's perfect for this week, right, in the spirit of the season. But looking for those Easter eggs, looking for what's not said, the buried words, the buried phrases to get to the heart of that issue. And again, it's drawing inferences. So to show this, I'd just like to share a couple examples of exchanges that I had with students. And as I'm sharing what this student said, and I'll share what, excerpts from my responses, listen for the Easter eggs, listen for the clues, and see what kind of one-on-one care you think this one specific student might need. So we're going to talk about Jamila first. She says, how are you today, Dr. B? I want to talk to you about the assignments. I'm feeling very defended in this class. I'm not understanding. I'm scared. I have memory issues. I'm not savvy anymore. I don't comprehend things fast. I don't want to fail, but I'm feeling like I am. I'm not making excuses. It's just my life. So immediately, right, there are some clues there. So the first thing I'll do, and later I'll ask you more about what you would do, and I'm just going to share now modeling what I might have done and what I did do in this situation. First thing I always do is go right to their introduction. And in her introduction, Jamila shared that she had a traumatic brain injury, other illnesses affecting memory processing, and confidence. And so that tells me, the Easter egg there is, that we can't even get to what her abilities are. We need to make this student realize, you know what? It's okay not to be fast. Take your time. And that's exactly how I started my message. I shared with her, I'm a slow reader, and I often have to read things a few times before I get it. It's hard for me to process information. I used to be embarrassed, but it's just me. Take it or leave it. I think you're phenomenal the way you are. Let's focus on what I can help you with right now. Is there an assignment you're struggling with? How can I help? We will work together to get you feeling better. And so realizing in that moment that culture of care for this student at this specific moment in time, not maybe later, but right now, meant she needs to know it's okay not to be fast. Later, she follows up with, I have a question on the assignment. I'm confused. Do I do this? Do I do that? I'm sorry if I'm asking dumb questions or too many questions. Again, another Easter egg, the confidence, that's the issue. So in this case, I responded with, let's make one thing clear between us. You and your learning experience are important to me, and there's no such thing as dumb questions, too many questions. And I won't read my entire response. I took a lot of time with this one. This student needed a really high touch handhold care. But explaining to her, you're here to learn. That means asking questions. If you didn't, you wouldn't be learning. I'd be disappointed. Seeing you in my inbox is the best part of my day. It says much about you that you feel comfortable. Be gentler with yourself. You deserve that. Agreed? And I asked her to respond. Do you agree with what I've said here? And then I answered her question. Now, one thing that's interesting in this case is I had this inkling that maybe if I left her a voice message and reminded her that I'm not just something on the other side of the screen, that I'm a human, I recorded an audio comment for her and I asked her to do the same. And she responded with, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I could do that. This is so cool. And from then on, she started sending me audio comments and felt much more comfortable. I don't want to run out of time. I don't know how much more time I have, but I had one more quick story with another student, a student name, we'll call him Kyle. And this is the opposite. I shouldn't say the opposite end of the spectrum, but this student reached out on a Tuesday where we're just in, UAGC, for those of you who don't teach here, that's our grading day. The weekend's on a Monday. And it was a Tuesday afternoon, and this student reached out. I'm curious about homework, ones that have been graded and ones that have not. I had already been able to grade one discussion board, but simply just hadn't had time to get to the other one yet. I'm worried. I want to make sure I didn't miss something, and then went on to ask. I noticed, though, that I got a 0.22 instead of the full 0.25, and it says proficient, and it contains a few minor errors, and I know it's only 0.3, but I'm dead set on doing the best. And listen for this, because I truly never did well in high school, and this is my second chance to do the best I can. This email was 4 paragraphs long, and that was the Easter egg, right? So again, go back to their introduction. This is an active duty military student. He thrives on clarity, boundaries, mission focused, very reverent toward me, and takes full ownership of his mistakes in the process. So culture of care for him meant he wants to know why he lost 0.1. And he needs to know that to feel like he belongs here and to feel like he's part of our unit, right? And he just needs that sense of scaffolding. And if he has that, he will achieve his mission. And he did. He ended up, I took several paragraphs to explain the process, and he would constantly message me, thanking me, just for taking the time. And I'm sure he did this with all of his professors, that I came from almost being kicked out of high school, almost being held back in numerous grades, being told I probably wouldn't graduate, to now being in college and actually succeeding for once. I'm giving school my all because it is my second chance to do right. There it is. And that's him. That's not me. That's him being the beneficiary of what we do here. So I'd like to now, I think I'm turning it back to you, James.
Thank you, Joan. Absolutely wonderful stories. I enjoyed hearing them. And if I could piggyback off of one of your stories with the communications piece, I found that for me, it's nice to leave students. I actually leave each one of my students an audio message when I do the introductions, and they like to attach a voice to the face. And what I've come to realize during the culture of care is that it's not always just the students that are struggling. Every student gets and needs that culture of care. And it's the presentation prior to this talked about equity and equality. And sometimes you have to look at it from that lens. And so I'm going to share one other story with you. I had a student that called me, and I leave my phone number in the classroom because I honestly want my students to call me. And I tell them, hey, between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m., I try to sleep. Anytime other than that, go ahead, give me a call. And a student called me, and I answered the phone, and her first comment was, "You're real." I said, "Why wouldn't you think I was real?" She said, "I thought it was a computer back there generating all those responses." I said, "No, I'm real. I'm really here. I will take your phone call. If I don't, leave me a message. I will call you back, text me, whatever. I'm here for you." And so that was a connection that I was able to make with a student that thought there was, I guess, AI back there. And this was years ago. So it was kind of interesting that happened. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is if you look at the slide there's lots of things that bring stress into the lives of the students and the professors. But when we look at those stresses, everyone's going to react differently. Everyone's going to see things differently. So when we approach the culture of care, we have to understand it and realize that. So if I can steal a little bit from Dr. Maxwell's presentation, I have here a little 3x5 card in my hand. So take a quick second and in the chat, put down how many sides you think there are to this 3x5 card. And go ahead and hit enter. Don't be afraid. Ooh, 2, 7, 6, 6, 2, 2, 2. Okay, I want to talk to whoever said 7 because I'm interested in that one. But most people say 2. But realistically, you have front, back, top, bottom, left, right. It's a perspective. There's really 6 sides to this, and it all depends on how you look at it. So in looking at that, culture of care is not new to us. We've been doing it. We do it. We've just called it something else. And sometimes when you change the name of something, you can increase or decrease its value or perspective. So when you look at that, think about all the classes where we teach and we talk about perspectives or perceived value. And that's what's happened with the culture of care. So let me share another story. I used to be a professional chef and teach at a culinary college. And one of the things that I would point out to my students is, okay, let's say you go into an average restaurant and you have a steak cooked whichever way you would like it, rare, medium, well done, however. And you have some mashed potatoes with garlic heavy cream, butter, salt, a little splash of white pepper, hint of nutmeg. Now, I'd ask, what would you pay for that meal? And some people would say, well, $25, $30. I said, okay, what would you pay for just the potatoes? About $3.95. I said, okay, so take this same perspective, same exact ingredients, and take that same mashed potato dish, transfer it to a high-end restaurant, and now we're going to call it palm puree. What do you pay for it? They're like, well, $12.95. And see, that's what's going on. Our culture of care, we have the same ingredients. We've renamed it and changed the menu a little bit. And look at the value of it. Look at what it does. Look at what it brings. So that's just a perspective on it I want to share with everyone about culture of care and how we look at it, how we react to it. And remember, if you have a menu and you take it to the table, everybody should get to eat, right? Just a perspective. The last thing that I would like to leave you with is someone put in the chat during the waterfall exercise that we want to know about accountability. And here's how I handle it. One little thing. I create a little miniature contract with my students, and it simply says something to the effect of, okay, you're asking for X, whether it's extra time or whatever the case is. Give them this mini contract that simply says, here's what you're asking. Give me a date and time when you're going to submit it, and send this to them. They sign it, they send it back to you. And so what I'm getting at is I learned in a little seminar is that when you're working with folks to give them accountability, you give them two choices, and then you honor the choice. And that's what you do. Give them two choices, honor the choice. And you'll be surprised at what you get. They will amaze you because, as Joan mentioned earlier, everybody wants to succeed. No one comes here to fail. It's our job to assist them. Denise?
Well, this is me again. And James, you set me up perfectly. Thank you so much. I've been using that expression that you taught us actually, give them choices and then honor their choice. I've been using that exact language in my interactions with students. So I want to thank you with that. That really, I think, engenders a sense of ownership of their goals and outcomes. And that's kind of what I want to speak to now is accountability. About giving students what I call roots and wings, where being that my course is the second course in their sequence, it's giving them the solid foundation so that they can then be propelled to succeed in future courses. The last thing an instructor who has them 10 courses down wants is for me to have this just be a grab bag candy game, willy-nilly free-for-all where they can submit wherever they feel like it. To me, that's not necessarily culture of care. That's flexibility isn't chaos, right? There has to be some structure. And so again, I'm going to share this time an example of a single student and several interactions and how this evolved, because this is one I ended up copying, pasting, and saving to remind myself of how things can evolve. And this student to me could be a case study of how he changed and grew and just hopefully giving him what he needs to give him those roots so that he has the wings to succeed later. So let's play Find the Easter Egg, where I'm going to read you a few short excerpts. And if you want to put in the chat, what does this suggest or what does this call for? What is the hint or the clue that you hear in what this student is saying? And then how do you think you might respond to that? What would be your reaction? What would you advise the student, right? So this student, we'll call him Jalen. I went back to his introduction. He's a truck driver, so he's got a horrible schedule. If any of you have had truck drivers, you know this. They're very challenging. An incredibly strong student, though, when he does submit his work, right? So he reaches out, again, deferentially. Hi, Mrs. Joan. Okay, I'm sorry for the late work. I'm really trying to balance out this work and school life. I'm a truck driver that is up early, staying up late. Try my best to get my work submitted on time. Please forgive me now and in the future. What do you hear there? And what does that signal to you? Does this student need flexibility? Do they need structure? Do they need accountability? Do they need limitations? What does this student need? What do you hear? Okay. Time management and organizational skills, flexibility, grace and support. Yep. Time management, flexibility, no need to apologize, support. Exactly. And I think all of those things, in my experience, my courses are high enrollment, so I typically have 40 students at a time. And the key phrase here for me was, please forgive me now and in the future. If I did not nip that in the bud right away, what I felt like and what I took away from this, and thankfully what it ended up being the right thing, was I was almost being put on advisement that I'm going to be late all the time. And so what that signaled to me, many of you hit it, was time management. This student needed to know that this isn't a willy-nilly thing, and that the greatest gift I can give you is helping you put together some sort of scaffolding, some sort of structure where I am willing to be flexible as long as you're communicating with me. You can't just submit whatever you want, right? I'm flexible if you're flexible about communicating with me. Then we will set up plans incrementally along the way, right? That support, and I'm down for that. But this isn't just I'll submit, now I'm putting you on notice that in the future I'm just going to be late, and no, because that's not doing him any favors. So in this instant, what this student needed for the culture of care was flexibility, but limitations, right? And so that's what I responded. What do you need? How can I, and we put together a plan for how we could do this. This student followed up later, and listen for some clues here. It's
Jill,
very.
Can I jump in here? You've got 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
For the whole presentation, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be very quick. It's been very difficult trying to maintain and complete my work in a timely manner while driving trucks. It's not a complaint. Failure isn't an option. There's times where I'm accessing schoolwork on my iPhone instead of a laptop. That's my problem with late work. Failure is not an option. I'm up and driving from 3 to 6. I'm fatigued. Lack of focus is the problem, but I'm determined, though I am. And so, again, think about it. Similar thing. What does that suggest? What does that call for? This student needed consistent scaffolding, consistent, not to say monitoring, but reminders of, okay, and he really liked when I would sort of reach out to him now and then. And so I started doing that. I made a mark on my calendar to reach out to him, and he responded, I took a day off and caught myself up with some missing work. Could you inform me what I'm missing so I could improve your grade? Now, what's interesting about that, to me, that's another Easter egg. Could you inform me? I'm going to echo James. I'll give him the choices, but then I'll honor his choices. And I use that in situations like this, where I'm not going to go in the grade book. In order to have this student feel accountable, I'll be flexible, but I advise this student, you go to the grade book, you tell me what you're asking to make up. I'll tell you the date, you respond, and that's our incomplete contract. That's the kind of thing he needed. That's the scaffolding this student needed. And then following up, after I start seeing he's performing well, just to say, I'm so happy to see you so active in class. You're such a strong student, great thinking and writing. I know your schedule's tight. I just want you to know how impressed I am and what an asset you are to the learning community. And he just responds with, failure isn't an option. This has been challenging, but I'm trying my best. Thank you so much. What did he need most? The flexibility, but the limitations. And that, in tandem, I think is one of the pillars of the culture of care.
Well, Joan and James, what incredible wealth of knowledge you are. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can come on screen. And I did have an opportunity to copy down some of the questions, and I think we can popcorn around and share our expertise and knowledge. James, I'm going to ask you to extend a little bit. One of the questions beyond building student accountability was, what happens when the student misses an agreed upon extension? And I know we discussed this in our prep time. What's your response to a student when you gave them the plan, they participated in it, and then they didn't follow through?
Great question. So I know probably old school instructors are probably like, that's it, you're done, you get an F or whatever the case is. But I like to keep the dialogue open, at least for the first interaction, and ask something like, help me to understand X. So when they miss it, I can reach out, or if they reach out like, look, I know it was due Friday at midnight, it's running a little bit late. And rather than attack or assault them, I simply say, help me to understand what happened, not why you were late or any of those other things. And then they give me, well, hey, I had to pick up my kid from school or something happened. Okay, cool. How much more time do you need? And if it's within reason, I'll work with them. if they say another 6 weeks, obviously that's going to be a little bit out there. But start with that diffuser. And I think I mentioned this in one of our gatherings. Use a diffuser like that. Help me to understand and give them the opportunity to explain. That way you can also understand if they're abusing the culture of care or abusing the system, or if it's a legitimate issue. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I know when we were prepping and we talked a little bit about this, my approach has been, I'm willing to work with them on one kind of, okay, let's do a do-over. But if it's a repeated pattern of each time that I'm establishing something with them, they don't follow through, then I am not going to be agreeable to continue to do that on a repeated basis. I don't know, Joan, if you had anything to add to that.
I feel the same way. I feel like I'm not doing them any favors if I continue to let them. There's such a thing as too much flexibility, I think, and it's not a hard line in the sand. Again, there's no template for this. But I feel like if I give a student an option to have a makeup contract and they agree to it, and then I say, oh, well, just kidding, we'll do another one. I personally don't do that. Once we have the contract, like James said, I honor it. That was their choice. So.
I think
And if I could, apologies, Denise. Can I just 10 seconds? One of the other things I do in that the first contract is I give them 2 dates and times, and I say, hey, if you don't finish it by this time, the current grade will stand. And so that's kind of how I mitigate that in the beginning. Now, if something comes up, and like I said, if it seems like it's legitimate, I'll work with them as long as I don't see a pattern of abuse. Sorry, apologies.
Not a problem at all. This kind of ties into one of the questions about how do you maintain academic rigor. And I think that is part of it, that we are trying to help them not only as a learner and mastering the content, but we also are trying to develop them as a student, as an employee, where these soft skills transfer. And so the intent of culture of care is not to say you can do whatever you want, turn in work at any time, turn it all in at the end. That's never been the intent. It really is to provide them the support, the boundaries, the flexibility, encouragement to be successful with the learning and the mastery of the content. And so we do hope that we continue to communicate to students that we're not lessening the academic rigor. We're just wanting you to be able to submit your very best work. And Joan and James, you can certainly chime in if you'd like.
Absolutely. Joan, if you don't mind, I just have one thing I'll throw out there.
Please.
In the beginning of my course, the first 3 or 4 announcements, one of the first things I do is I put out what I call ancillary expectations. And it's another contract of sorts. And it says, here's what I'm going to grade. Here's when I'm going to return papers. Here's what you expect of me as the professor. Here's what I expect of you as a student. And I put that in the announcements as a discussion that they can respond to. And I ask each of them in the introductions, in the first introduction that I post, and in that announcement, to create a post replying to that saying that they've read and understood it. That way we start off on level ground. Here's what the expectations are. And I also put in the contract in that ancillary announcement, ancillary expectation announcement, that if you're going to have need to turn something in late, reach out to me before, not after. Because if you reach out to me before, and here's how I phrase it, I can now go to bat for you. I have something to take to someone so I can look out for you. So that puts us on the same team versus, well, you turned it in late and we're going to struggle. That's just a tactic I do.
So this is a question that's going to extend us beyond some of what we focused on, which was what we do with students, but it is a very pertinent question. It's how do we convince other colleagues to show grace to students?
So for me personally, I'm former military, single dad. I've done all those things. I've been in the positions that other students have been in. And I think as professors, we've been in those positions as well. We have to explain, or I wouldn't even say explain, share with the other professors that life happens. Sometimes life gets in the way of life, as I like to say, but life happens. We're all human, and we have to show them that we are all human. Sometimes we need a second to tie something up. Sometimes things happen in our life that we don't expect. And for us not to accept that from our students, I think is a little bit beyond human capabilities and understanding. If we expect it of each other and of the people we work with, I think we have to approach it from that lens.
I think if we all look back at our own lives and think about the person who gave us an opportunity, gave us a break, opened a door for us, wrote us a letter of recommendation, we all have those moments in our lives that we are on the path we're on because somebody else showed grace to us. They helped us in some way. They modeled something. They mentored. And so I think sometimes getting somebody to reflect and connect to that life experience of what got them to where they are, it's a little bit easier for them to say, you're right, I can be that person in someone else's life to give them the grace. I am just impressed with the questions. I hope that we're able to copy or capture the chat, because I think a lot of what's in there we can take back to our committee and say, hey, let's talk about some of these, because we are representatives out to each department, and that gives us an opportunity to share the dialogue, the resources, the conversation. So we would love to capture these topics and then take them to the committee that'll be meeting again in April. But I know we're at the end of our time. James and Joan, it was such an honor to get to work with you on the committee and in this process. You both are such dedicated, incredible educators. I'm always in awe of your incredible work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And with that being said, I would like to extend a gracious thank you to all of our panelists for both your time as well as your insight, and to inform everyone that that concludes our presentation, Balancing Flexibility and Limitations, Lessons Learned from Fostering a Culture of Care in Practice. So hopefully everyone that has viewed is able to take something away that proves beneficial. And I hope that you all have enjoyed all of the sessions for today.